Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into,
Oh, Bluesky.
yeah, Bluesky.
Yeah.
We're seeing it everywhere right now,
Mhm.
and it's all thanks to this really interesting article by CBC News, all about its recent popularity surge,
Mhm.
especially in light of the election. It really seems like things have been heating up over there.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to be looking at what's causing this whole shift, what it means for social media in general, and what we can maybe expect going forward.
Yeah.
So first off,
So Bluesky, they gained a whopping 1.25 million users
wow,
since the election, pushing them past 15 million total users.
really?
Yeah,
No.
and to put that in perspective, back in September, they were only at 9 million.
Yeah, that's a huge jump. I mean,
Shit.
obviously the article points to a lot of this having to do with Elon Musk and how he's been running X, formerly Twitter. It seems like a lot of users are just not on board with a lot of the decisions he's been making.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Especially with, Musk's vocal support for Trump during the election. And then on top of that, Trump appointing Musk to this government role, a lot of people are seeing that as the final straw.
Right.
In fact, Professor Megan Bopler, she studies social media, and she actually called this the nail in the coffin for people who were already pretty skeptical of Musk's influence on the platform.
Nail in the coffin. That's pretty strong wording. I mean, that really makes you think about how deep this goes. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem like it's just people disagreeing with a new feature or something. This seems more like a clash of values almost.
For sure, it really raises the question of whether social media as a whole is kind of fracturing along these ideological lines.
Right.
So is Bluesky becoming more of a progressive safe haven
Right.
while X leans towards a more conservative user base? It's something to think about.
That is a really interesting point. So why Bluesky, though? What is it about this platform specifically that's drawing people in? The article talks about its decentralized structure. I don't know, can you maybe explain what that means in a way that makes sense?
Okay, so basically, decentralization means no single entity has all the control. Like imagine if you owned like your own little corner of the internet. You could decide what shows up there, what content is allowed.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of the idea behind Bluesky.
So it's like you're not just at the mercy of some algorithm that you don't really understand.
Exactly. Think about all the things people complain about with X and Facebook, right? Algorithmic bias, echo chambers, it can feel like you're being manipulated, right?
Yeah.
Bluesky's approach tries to fix that by giving users more power.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it looks like it's working because the article even says some Bluesky users are reporting that it just feels like a less hostile environment
Hmm.
and that there's better engagement with their posts. Like they finally found a quiet corner in all this crazy online world.
Totally.
Yeah.
It taps into this larger trend, where people are looking for alternatives. They want to get away from the big guys, the ones with all the problems. They want something authentic, something they can actually control.
So Bluesky, it's not brand new. It
Mhm.
actually started as a project within Twitter before they decided to go their separate ways.
Yeah, like a spin-off almost.
Nah.
And of course, we can't talk about competitors without mentioning Threads.
Right.
Meta's answer to X and Bluesky, Threads has actually racked up even more users than Bluesky.
Right. But is that all just hype? The article kind of questions if those numbers on Threads really mean anything. Like, are people actually active on the platform, or did they just sign up out of curiosity? You know,
That's a good question. Only time will tell if they can keep that momentum going. But what I find particularly interesting is what this shift might mean for journalists.
maybe, yeah.
They've relied so heavily on X
Yeah.
to share their work, connect with sources. So where do they go now? And does this have bigger implications for how news is shared and discussed? I think it's something we really need to consider.
That's actually something I hadn't really thought about before. If journalists are leaving X and they're the ones shaping so much of the public conversation, what does that mean for the platform's influence as a whole? It's really kind of wild when you think about it.
Absolutely. And here's a really interesting twist the article mentions. President Biden, he chose X to announce that he wasn't running for re-election.
Wait, really? With all this talk about users leaving and the potential for it to become more divided ideologically, wouldn't you think he would have chosen something that aligned better with his views?
You would think so, right? But it just goes to show you X still has a lot of pull, even with all the drama going on.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if Bluesky can really compete with that kind of staying power.
It's like a real David and Goliath situation, right?
It is.
There's so much happening right now, and it's pretty amazing to see how these new platforms like Bluesky are kind of shaken things up.
It really is a dynamic landscape, and in the end, the users will decide who comes out on top.
So for all of you listening, here's something to think about. If social media keeps splitting along these ideological lines, what does that mean for our ability to actually have real conversations with people who might have different opinions? Can we still find common ground? It's something to keep in mind as we try to figure out how to navigate this whole new social media world.
It really is.
Uh,
And the answer might be in understanding how these platforms with their different values and approaches are shaping not just our online experience, but our world as a whole,
yeah,
you know?
it's really fascinating.
It is.
Um, okay, well, we're going to take a quick break here, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll wrap up our look at Bluesky and see what its rise could mean for online communication going forward. So stay tuned.
Yeah, it's a really important question to consider, you know? If we're all just stuck in our own little echo chambers, how are we supposed to have any meaningful conversations with people who think differently than we do?
I mean, it is kind of scary to think about, right?
Eh.
But maybe this is where the whole decentralized structure of Bluesky could actually have a good thing. If it gives users more control over their feeds and who they interact with, maybe you can actually help bridge that divide.
I like that. That's an interesting thought, you know? What if having more agency over their online experience actually makes people more open to different viewpoints?
Right. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
Anyway, getting back to the article, they mentioned another big spike in Bluesky users back in September when X was temporarily suspended in Brazil.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show you another big reason why Bluesky is growing, the whole instability and uncertainty surrounding X. You know, when people can't access their main platform, they're going to start looking for alternatives.
And Bluesky's right there waiting for him.
Exactly. And the article even quotes a Bluesky spokesperson saying they're seeing increased activity from all over the US, Canada, the UK.
So it's not just an American thing. This is happening globally. It really makes you wonder if we're witnessing a fundamental change in how people think about social media.
It does. And the spokesperson mentioned a pretty diverse group of communities joining Bluesky, too, like Swifties, sports fans, journalists. That's going to help create a less polarized environment, right?
And maybe it's like a big melting pot of different ideas.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about Threads Meta's competitor.
Yeah.
They've got something like 275 million monthly users. That's insane.
It is. But remember, user numbers don't always tell the whole story, like we said before. It's not clear if those numbers translate into actual engagement. Are people using Threads actively, or did they just sign up because it was the new thing?
Yeah, like how many apps do we download and then completely forget about after a week?
Right.
Right? It's easy to get caught up in the excitement, but real engagement is a different story altogether. You know, speaking of excitement, the article makes this really interesting point about how social media is changing. It talks about how the 2010s were all about consolidation. A few big companies controlled everything.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing the opposite happening. Everything's fragmenting. What do you think about that?
Well, it's complicated, right? There are definitely some good and bad aspects to it. On the one hand, it's great that people can find communities that share their interests and values. It creates this sense of belonging.
Right.
But then on the other hand, it could also make things even more divided and polarized. What if we're all just talking to people who already agree with us?
Exactly. It's like we're all retreating to our own little corners of the internet where everyone thinks the same way. It doesn't seem like that's going to help us understand each other any better.
No, it doesn't. And the article points out that this fragmentation is especially worrying for journalists.
Oh, right, because they use platforms like X to connect with sources and share their work.
Exactly. So if journalists are leaving X, does that mean they're losing their ability to reach a large and diverse audience?
I guess so.
Huh.
Could this lead to, like, alternative media outlets popping up on platforms like Bluesky? What would that mean for how information is spread and how we consume news?
These are really important questions. And it's important to remember that as long as those key figures stay on X, like politicians, journalists, influential voices, it's going to continue to shape public opinion in a big way.
Right. It's like a vicious cycle.
Right.
People stay on X because that's where everything is happening, and things keep happening on X because that's where the people are. But then you have someone like President Biden, who seems to be going against the grain by choosing X to announce he's not running again. It just seems so strange.
It is a curious choice. It really shows you that X still holds a lot of weight, even with all the dissatisfaction and people leaving. It makes you wonder what the thinking was behind that decision.
Yeah, maybe his campaign manager needs to catch up on what's going on in social media. But it all comes back to that big question. Is Bluesky just a temporary escape from X? Or can it actually become a real alternative in the long run?
Well, the article suggests that while people are moving to Bluesky to make a statement, it's not clear if they're planning on staying.
So they're making their voices heard, but will they stick around for good? It sounds like Bluesky needs to offer more than just an escape from X.
I think so. It needs to establish its own unique identity and value proposition, something that users can't find anywhere else.
Maybe that's its decentralized nature and the possibility of a more balanced and less hostile environment. But it also needs to find ways to deal with misinformation and harmful content, which can be harder to do on a decentralized platform.
That's a crucial point. Finding that balance between user freedom and content moderation is a tricky thing. It'll be interesting to see how Bluesky handles it.
I'm really curious to see how this all develops. The social media landscape is constantly changing, and it's fascinating to see how new platforms like Bluesky are shaking things up.
It reminds us that the digital world is always evolving. We need to be able to adapt and think critically to navigate this ever-changing terrain.
Couldn't agree more. It's like we're all explorers venturing into uncharted territory and trying to make sense of it all.
And who knows what we'll discover along the way.
That's the best part. We're going to take a quick pause here, but stick around. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Bluesky and explore what its rise might mean for the future of online communication. Welcome back. So we've been digging into this Bluesky article for CBC News, and it's really got us thinking. The article focuses a lot on Bluesky as this competitor to X, but it also mentions Threads, Meta's kind of version of this new platform. It's interesting to compare those two.
Yeah, definitely. You've got Bluesky all about giving users more control, making things decentralized. Then you've got Threads, which is really leveraging that huge network Meta already has.
Yeah, it's like two completely different approaches, right?
Yeah.
One is about empowering individuals, and the other is building on this existing power structure.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder which one people will actually stick with long term.
It's a great question, and the article actually quotes a professor who specializes in emerging media, and they argue that people are drawn to platforms like Bluesky because the whole algorithm experience is different, potentially less manipulation and more authenticity, you know?
I can see that. I think we're all starting to realize how much algorithms control what we see online. It's natural to want some transparency there. Some saying how that works.
Absolutely. Platforms that put a premium on transparency and user control are probably going to have a real edge as things move forward. It's like a power shift. Users aren't just content to passively consume anymore. They want to be involved in shaping their online world.
That's exciting to think about, right? We can actually have an impact on the future of social media by making choices about how we engage and what we expect from these platforms.
Exactly. The choices we make today will determine what the digital world looks like tomorrow. It's not just about what we post or who we follow. It's also about supporting platforms that reflect our values, you know?
So to kind of bring it all back, it seems like Bluesky could be a real turning point.
Yeah.
It represents this growing desire for something different, something that gives users more control. It's about recognizing how algorithms shape our lives online.
And it's still early, but Bluesky's growth definitely shows that users want to change. They're looking for something new. It's a reminder that the digital world is constantly in motion, and we need to be active participants in shaping it, not just letting it shape us.
That's a great way to put it. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of social media. It's clearly a world that's evolving all the time. And we hope you'll keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep helping to create the kind of digital world you want to see. That's all for today. Thanks for listening.